Hi, this is Suzanne in Ohio. I have a project shared today. Now, in a former video, about 3 videos back, I showed some textile collages that I've been doing and how I turned the images into greeting cards. So this is more of the same. And when I first showed them, let me see here, I showed a bird series like little birds and some seashore images. So you'll see those again. But while I was painting these little birds, I had painted an extra Goldfinch and I didn't want him to go to waste. So I kind of executed him on in a totally different way than I did the first ones. Now let me see if I can get my camera out here. There, that shows you a little bit more. Now it's a cloudy, rainy day here. 3 days of rain calling for here in Ohio. So I'm using artificial light. So perhaps the colors are not as brilliant and bright as they are in real life. But nonetheless, you can see how I went about this. So this is a little puffy or a mini art quilt, collage fabric, whatever. On this one, how I said I executed a little bit different, I had a piece of an old handkerchief that my sister gave me, and I used it as the background and then positioned the little goldfinch right on the flower. And then because he didn't really have any feet, I put some embroidery stitches to mimic the flower petals right in that spot. So it looks like he's sitting on the flower for anybody that cares about that much detail. But the whole real point is the whole composition and the color scheme. So I've made several little textile arts and turned them all into cards, which I wanted to show you today. Now you can use these images in journal pages or for pockets or tags or journaling cards, anything you want. But so it crosses the line between the bridge, I should say, between textile art and paper art. And I've always been a believer that you should use your artwork in more than one way. So that's what I've done. All right, so here's the first thing I did was scan this little goldfinch off, and I put him on greeting cards. Both images are the same, but the background colors are a little bit different. And then each card has a little piece of some kind of textile at the bottom of it. It's just to use up the space and to more or less say it's textile. So that gives it some nice dimension. So that's the first one I wanted to show you. And then you see this one right here on this pile. So let me get my textiles from that. Okay. All right. I should have had these out of the bag. So what I did was created 4 fantasy mushroom collages. And let me back out here so you can see the whole thing. After doing several of these, I realized it's much easier for me to, I can't get my mouse to move, to work on a larger scale. So these are quite large. They're full paper size, 8.5 by 11. So that's how I started out. So what I did in this series, and you can see, I'll show you all 4 of them. I had some prints, jelly prints, that I had done with botanicals a couple years ago, and I thought, oh, those would make a wonderful background. So you can see the jelly print in the background here, and here's one that some of them are positive, some of them are negative. This, in fact, is the negative print, so it leaves the plant material area blank. But that was my background. And then they're more simple than they look because your eye just blends it all together. There's really not that much on there, but a couple snippets of fabric, such as here, here, and here, and then with some hand-dyed lace layered on top. So it gives a full enough composition to look good. Now, these mushrooms are quite puffy. I would say in places a half of an inch. So I kind of really stretched the envelope. I wasn't sure if they would print off without shadows, but they certainly did. They scanned beautifully and the prints are gorgeous. And so the mushrooms are made out of lace, so I call them fantasy mushrooms. And this is my hand-dyed lace, 2 layers of it, a solid in the background and the lacy leaves on the top. And there's the small one there. So here's what that card ended up looking like. Now each of the cards I placed on different colored cardstock according to what I had, and the envelopes are coordinated too. Something this dark needs a little fly leaf in there so you can write on it, so I'll put something on that before I send it off to the owner. But here's the second one. Let's see if I can find that image. Yeah, here we go. So in real life, I enhanced this color just a little bit as I printed it. So it's a little pinker, more of a plum color, but very, very close to the original. And that's the nice thing about scanning your things. If you want to adjust, tone down a color or pull out another color, you can do that in your printer settings. So that's the purple mushrooms. And then here's a gold one. And that's how that printed off. And again, just the jelly print in the background, dyed lace, and just a tiny bit of fabric snippets. This is one giant big mushroom, and I even left it so I can put my hand all the way under there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be stitched down, and I didn't want to lose any of the airiness about it. Of course, they are all appliqued on around the areas that count. So that's the gold one. And then here's the orange red or Chinese red one, whatever you want to call it. And this one is the positive print from the jelly plate, but it didn't have enough busyness for the background for me. So I used my Inktense pencils and put some faded plant material in the back. So 3 little fantasy mushrooms. And these little things can be moved around, and dyed lace. So there you have that. All right. So you can tell I've been having a lot of fun with these. And I think I have 4 different sets to show you. Maybe 5, I'm not sure. But this one that you see right here, I'm calling it Fond Memories and Roses. So here's how I came up with that. Now on another video you saw how I had made fabric roses, and they're on clusters of lace, and I've used them for many different things. So there's just 3 of those so you can get an idea. I put a little piece of pell on just to keep my threads from pulling through or showing. And this one just happens to be a string of small buds. And these 3 are very small. So, but here's what I did with this series. So let me put that aside. So these are barely attached. The roses are barely attached, 2 little snippets to the background. Now what I did with the background is I made a base and embroidered you know, a couching stitch all the way around. And then I have some an old music book, which was a school book on music course number 2 or 3, I forget what it is, late 1800s. And I scanned off some of the pages that had the etchings of the author of the song. So, the written by or the score by. So that's the background, and they have nice names like Homeward, Harvest Home. So all I did was lay this rose cluster on there, and then you can see that I took some ephemera and just tucked it in here behind the roses and arranged it the way I wanted so it would show up. Let me see if this will adjust so you can see this. Let me see. If I put it on autofocus, never know if it's right or wrong. Let's see what happens here. It should focus in. Yeah, there it goes. And just little snippets of, there's a diploma and the front of a book and a poem, handwritten poem, and some old photographs, whatever you would have. And that's why I called it Fond Memories and Roses. It invokes a lot of memory. So these are all pretty much alike except for the rose clusters and the ephemera that I chose to put in them. So let me show it to you this way. There's a front of an old book, and I feel like I'm always fiddling with these. And this one, again, more of the same. This one had front of an old greeting card on there, a bird feather, an old photograph. This camera takes its time to decide if it's going to focus. There we go, finally. And the name of that song is "Oh Love Divine." And then a fourth combination right there. So I'll put those aside, and then just so you can see the real textile in real life, there's that one, and that one, and whoops, extra rose laying on there, and then that one. Now you could do anything you wanted with something like this. You could print this off as a card and put a slit in there, you know how you do your paper arts in your journals, and leave the rose part as a pocket and then slide ephemera in it. You could do a double print and really get creative with it. Okay, these you already saw in the other video, the ocean, the vintage ocean. But for those, if there's anybody watching that didn't see the other videos, I made collages, textile collages, just exactly in the same manner. And what I did was all the seashells on here hand painted. So I painted the shells and on fabric with Inktense pencils, and then I cut them out and applicate them onto these backgrounds, these textile collages. So if you're interested in that, go back and look about the video that starts out with this bird series. So same thing here, I painted the birds on fabric with Inktense, cut them out, appliqued them onto, and in this case, this was copyright-free vintage front of a music page, sheet music. And then I won't go into that. If you're interested in that, go back and look at the other video. It starts out with the birds. Okay, now here's the ones you haven't seen. I'm getting them. I keep these things well protected. So now this series right here, I'm calling Quilt Remnants. because my idea was to create and feature the collages with something to do with old-fashioned quilting. And if anybody likes old-fashioned quilting, they would love these images. So let's find the one that's on the top there. So here's my little puffy or mini art quilt for this card right here. And so I use fabric, scrunched up little fabric rolls to create the beast cap. And then this one features hexes. And then I slow stitched embroidered the clover and then the little vine and stuff like that. Put a few old buttons on there. So that's the quilt one for hexes. Now they aren't backed yet. I will back them and probably sell these originals on my Etsy. If you're interested, just get a hold of me via my Etsy store. This image features applique because many quilts are an applique technique. So I appliqued, the only thing I sewed by hand was the strips for the birdhouse. I did sew, I'm sorry, by machine. I sewed those by machine, but everything else is appliqued one on pieces and parts on top of each other. Each flower and each leaf is all appliqued on there. And then slow stitch, chain stitch embroidery forms the vine for the morning glories. Now the morning glories are quite enhanced because I used ink tints and painted right on the fabric because that was a solid colored fabric and I didn't have anything else, so I used it. And that's what that card printed out like. And then this one features the Dresden plate, and I created a partial Dresden plate, and I had this little cross stitch from the thrift store which was just perfect for the colors and going along with flowers. So I mounted that on there, and then all of this is hand embroidery right on top of the Dresden plate. And one more. This image features yo-yos. And then what I did was I had an extra little pot that I had painted, and I appliqued it onto the center here, and it's got a tiny doily behind it, and just little yo-yos here and there. And here I created this little pear-shaped patchwork pincushion, and it's got some old vintage straight pins in it, and then a yo-yo that's only half done. So that celebrates the yo-yo technique for quilts. So that's what that one looked like. Okay, now for the pots. I love old granite. It's called Granite Ware or enameled ware pots, and just really love them. I have several old ones. Don't ask me why. I don't know. The older they are and the rustier they are, the better I like them. So my idea for this was, hold on a minute. I got to make sure I have everything here. Yeah, because when I created this, I thought, now I want my focal point to be smaller and have extra space so that I could superimpose something on top of it. And then I realized, well, they look just fine with nothing. But if you were using them in a journal, the print, you could put a label down here with a word on it or saying, or glue something on it, which I did that, and I'm going to show you how that turned out. But here's the original, and again, it's 8.5 by 11. And vintage textiles, some fabric in the background, hand-dyed lace, whatever it needed. And it's quite puffy too, but not near as much as the mushrooms. So it scanned off just beautifully. So let's find Now this color combination worried me a little bit, but I pulled it off, I think. Um, I made the mistake of putting a peach on a pink pot. So there you've got orange and peach. And I thought, well, I've got to make that work because I sure wasn't in the mood to start over painting another pot. Because to paint these pots with all the rusty look to them, I did several layers of ink tint. So I didn't want to start over. So I made it work. So I combined pinks or raspberries with peaches, and it turned out just fine. Just kind of really like it in a way. Different. Okay, and this one is the blue pot. So here's my picture and all these vintage textiles and fabrics. I've said before in other videos, I have a plethora of old calicos. Worked out just great for this. So there's that one. And then the last one is a little gold pot, like a teapot. Yellow and plum. Same method. Okay, so that's what those look like. I'll just leave that there, give you something to look at, and then I'll show you what I did with my original idea of superimposing things on the surface. So I did 3 different styles. So let's go stack number 1, 2, 3. Okay, now making these cards, I have ended up with so many cut off scraps of cardstock, and I tested out an idea of making Franken paper and using it as the card. It's fine, but it does require fly leaf, so I put a print of a lace in there so you could write on it, and it's kind of interesting in a way. Maybe I'll do it also with the quilt ones because quilts are pieces put together. So on these 4, I just simply glued some images that I liked that were reminiscent of old, and then see what they look like. There's the word laughter, an old photograph, and old advertisement, and just things I had on my desk. And I liked it. I really did. Really adds a lot of interest. So if you're given a special card, you could get the original card, make the card, and then put things on it appropriate for the person that you're giving it to. Now this one, what I did was I just put a tuck spot and a little tag on each one of these. Tuck spot and a tag. And I don't have strings on the tags yet, but I will. And it's very busy, but it appeals to those people that like to search for something to look at in every corner. So that's a second idea, quite similar to the first, but slightly different. And on these, I put the fold-out envelopes. So it opens up. This is actually a little tuck spot, the little bird image, but you can put something in it or just indicate that there's a space there. And then I glued the envelope on and left it as a tuck spot. So I'll just show you those. All these open up. And we all know how to make those. There's a little image of an old cross-stitch embroidery textile. This one, I put the front of an old envelope on there. Opens up. I did stick something in that little tuck spot. And then a tag on that one. And then this one opens up, same thing, and a little tag right there. So that's my puffy series. And this one, by the way, calling it Country Kitchen. So that's on my Etsy site as Country Kitchen. This one is on as Quilt Remnants. And this series is on there as Fond Memories and Roses. And these as Fantasy Mushrooms. So I have sets of the greeting cards listed on my Etsy store if you're interested. And if you buy more than one set of cards, I will give you a price break. So all you have to do is conversation me on Etsy. So I hope you enjoyed that. For those of you that love slow stitching and paper arts, don't forget to do the crossover. Treat your image like a scan it off, and then use it in your journals or your paper arts. Don't let anything go to waste, and don't let it get out of your hands until you've made a digital image of it. All right, thank you for watching. Come again soon. Let me see if I can get this to turn off. My little mouse just won't behave today. Bye.